Hey everybody, it's Uncle Grumpy and welcome to Grumpy Tonight. We certainly have a all-star lineup tonight. We've got Julie Ezell, an attorney here in Oklahoma City with Canada Law Group. We have Norma Sapp, who's been an activist in the state for almost 30 years now, and Lawrence Pasternak, who's been instrumental in behind the scenes in writing a lot of what we're looking at today. So let's just jump right into this here. Lawrence, I want to start with you. You've come up with a list here. What is this we're looking at? Is this 2612?
Yeah, so I put together a list of what I regarded as sort of the key issues in 2612, um, both pro and con, both good ones and bad ones. And I thought we could talk through, there's been a lot of complaints that 2612 deviates from 788, that it's really negative for the industry. And while there are negatives in it, there's just a lot of positives also that we shouldn't overlook. So I think it's worthwhile for us to talk through those issues and get a balanced perspective, and for us to be able to then really drill down on the specific issues that we think need to be addressed.
Okay, and Norma, we talked about some other trailer bills that might possibly fix some of this. Have you had a chance to go over any of those?
I looked at those bills you gave me the number of, and they're ready. They're waiting to go into a Senate committee, and so and they do have emergency clause on them. So Randy Whitekiller, you might be able to fit your information into that bill.
That's great. And Julie, as always, I'm counting on you to help us figure out what of this is actually constitutional, what of this they can actually do, and where we go from here. Lawrence, let's go ahead and start with the top of your list.
All right, I think it's going to appear up on the screen. There we go. And so can you see the little smiley faces and frowns? That sort of gives you a little quick picture of the pros and the cons. But let me just walk through it. I'll just sort of quickly summarize some of these. Section 3D7 authorizes banking regulations regarding medical marijuana. And so I take that to be a good thing. People
Yep.
don't want this to be a purely cash business. Section 6E11, that's one that Julie mentioned in a previous show, where the OMMA is allowed to impose various disciplinary actions on business licensees, and it gives a list of the various reasons for those actions. And then at the bottom of the list it says, quote, or any other basis identified by the department. So in addition to the specific enumerated reasons for sanctions, they also just have this catch-all at the bottom that just seems to be way too broad. So that's definitely one of the negatives. Section 7C, the first portion of it is positive. Basically, it extends HIPAA protection. It's a little unclear on this, but it extends HIPAA protection to patient licensees, which we should regard as good. And then towards the end of Section 7C, what it does is it says that the information held by the department can be made available to the patient, a designee of the patient, caregiver, or any physician of the patient. And we'll probably get back to talking about that afterwards.
Before we go down the whole list, because it is a pretty substantial list, like you said, the pros and the cons. Let's go back to your first negative here, Section 6E11. Julie, can you elaborate on this any? Can you tell us where the problems here might be?
Yeah, as Lawrence mentioned, this allows the health department to revoke a business license literally for any reason that they identify, and it doesn't have to be one of those enumerated in the statute. That taken together with another portion that provides their remedies says, what they're allowed to do if they revoke, essentially amounts to a warrantless search and seizure. There's a portion that says that, if they think that any evidence is being destroyed, they can enter and take remedies in addition to those listed. So in theory, under this provision, somebody, the health department decides, X is a problem. X isn't one of these things listed in the bill. It's something nobody really thinks is a problem. They think evidence of X is at risk of being destroyed. They can go on the business premises without notice, and one of the remedies that they can potentially use is to seize all product, which under Oklahoma and U.S. law, all of that together amounts to warrantless search
Is there any other industry or any other anything where you, with your legal experience, have seen a law that would allow this broad of an interpretation? Do we have this problem in other places?
No, I've seen laws that say, or any other violation of this statute as determined by the department, or any other violation of the rules as determined by the department. But this catch-all language doesn't tie it into a rule or statute violation. It literally could mean anything.
So does that leave it up to the person doing the inspection?
Yes, or it leaves it up to the department to essentially make illegal things that are not written in the law as illegal.
Isn't that what we discussed, or they discussed in that committee room the other night about one of the senators asked if these were going to be CLEAT certified officers that go and inspect these things? Isn't that the same thing?
Yeah, it's tied into it because, none of these are required to be CLEAT certified, so you're having somebody with very little background whatsoever making these determinations.
Right.
Norma, do we have any bills yet that you're aware of that address this issue?
No, I don't know of any yet. This is kind of a, how do we get rid of this now?
Okay, well, that's one we'll just move on from, but we'll make a note that that one's not being addressed. That's what we're going to do here.
Section 6E11.
Let's go through all these, and anyone we have a problem with, we'll look and see what the problem is, how, if it's being addressed, and if not, then that's what we know we need to deal with tomorrow. That lets everybody know where the issues are for tomorrow.
Right.
Lawrence, what's the next one here?
Well, let me just add in then a little bit concerning Section 7C, and we might return to it still later on, but this is frankly the one that I'm worried about the most, the one that basically allows the release of patient information to any physician. And so we already know that pain management doctors around the state have been terminating patients, and likewise there are many oncologists who are refusing to treat patients who have medical marijuana cards. So there are patients who have already gotten their cards and have not disclosed that to their doctor. And what this could do basically is that if this information becomes available, such as through the prescription monitoring program or in another way, then the doctors can basically just en masse terminate their patients, terminate from pain management, terminate from cancer treatment, any patient with a medical marijuana card. And so in pain management, there's a 50% increase in suicide rates among chronic pain patients due to forced tapering and due to physicians terminating patients. As I see it, 7C is about life and death.
Okay, Julie, let me ask you this from a legal standpoint. If we'll use my exact experience. Used cannabis for 3 years before we passed the law. My pain management doctor was aware of it, was fine with it, watched me get healthy, watched my life get back on track. We passed it, I got a card, I got canceled. If that happens in mass numbers because of something like this, do these people have any legal recourse?
Yeah, they certainly would have a claim for medical abandonment in the very least. Which essentially says that, a doctor drops them, for a reason such as this, and if they aren't given enough medication or guidance to taper with, and most people who have been on opiates for, a number of years can't taper in 30 days. It's not reasonable.
No.
Or if they drop them altogether and don't refer them to another doctor who will treat them, or if there's not another doctor around, those are the facts that lead to a cause of action for medical abandonment.
Yeah, and that's also what ends up with what Lawrence is talking about with the suicides and the people that call us that are at the end of their rope. Norma, do we have a bill here? I think we have one here that addresses this, do we not?
On the protection of the pain patients?
Yes, I think in talking to Representative Eccles, he talked about language he had that would limit it to solely the doctor that wrote the recommendation. Is that not in one of these
I have
bills?
not seen that.
Because I haven't been over these bills yet. So
yeah, I haven't seen it.
Okay, well, he's going to call in here in a little bit at about 6:45, so we'll ask him about that one right there.
Don't forget.
That's a good one to ask him. Okay, Lawrence, go ahead with your list.
All right, next, Section 8B, where the bill says that local governments can't add any additional restrictions or charging any fees to patients, such as if a patient wants to do a home grow. It prohibits municipalities and counties from charging any kind of fee requiring there to be permit and so on.
Okay, all right, before we go on, Julie, let me ask you, we know these counties and cities have put this idea out there for months now that you've got to register your home grow. I don't know of anybody who's done that. Nobody has admitted it. Where are they going to be in all this? Are the counties going to be stopped at this point? Is this going to take care of this problem?
Yes, absolutely. If this statute, goes into effect, it will.
And what happens to those that have already turned in all their information and now are friends with local law enforcement?
Well, I mean, those who have paid, I think it's down in or up in Alva. I want to say it's either $100 or $500. I can't remember. To get a home grow permit, those that have actually done it are just going to be out of luck. Unfortunately, there's not, because it was questionably lawful at the time.
Well, but this should at least stop it from happening further.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Lawrence, go ahead.
All right. Section 8D is also a positive one. Basically, it says that marijuana patient card holders can't be denied any sort of public assistance benefits, TANF, and so forth. Section 8E, I expect to be a very popular one out there. It restores Second Amendment rights, at least at the state level.
Can I jump in on that one real quick, Lawrence? I've heard a couple of people wondering with the new permitless carry law, with that and this together, if it will still allow medical marijuana patients to do the permitless carry. I've heard a few people question that, and my reading and other lawyers that I have talked to, we are all in agreement that this will allow patient card holders to do permitless carry.
That's great.
And just a little interesting aside, the Gun Control Act and the Controlled Substances Act basically hit Congress at the same time in the late 1960s. And so when Congress established the Controlled Substances Act that established a Schedule I status of a lot of drugs, including marijuana, right at the same time they had the Gun Control Act, which prohibited anyone who might be using Schedule I to own a gun. And personally, I don't think there's a lot of coincidence.
And what year was that?
So the 1968 was when the Gun Control Act was passed, and then the Controlled Substances Act went through a series of sort of phases, and it was in the late 60s and I think finalized in 1970.
So for the first time since we, or most of us, were very young, we'll actually be able to have legal cannabis and our gun rights. Whether or not we choose to carry is up to us, but we'll have that choice.
If part of the reason for the Second Amendment is to protect us as individuals against overreach from the government,
right,
then what do? As soon as they say, no, we're not going to let you as individuals use your bodies as you see fit, now they're also going to disarm you so you can't protest it, at least with weapons.
You said that was in 1970?
68 was the Gun Control Act, and then 70, I think, is when the Controlled Substances Act was finalized. There were a number of committees, and I just don't remember the exact details of what hit what.
So you were, 35 or 40?
Oh, yeah, yeah, you're just hilarious. I knew the humor was coming out eventually. She was being too quiet over here.
All right. So, Section 8F. Just broadly, it includes a number of other further patient protections, which include such things as patient licensees shall not be denied access to businesses, let's say, for instance, going into a restaurant and so on. As well as that, they can't be removed or sanctioned from with professional organizations. So an organization for attorneys or for physicians or for real estate agents or whatever can't remove their members if they get medical marijuana cards. Section 8J basically says that employees who have medical marijuana cards have the same remedies as Title 40, Section 563. That's something called like the Drugs in the Workplace Act. And so more or less it creates continuity between whatever remedies that employees who have to do urine testing and might be facing employment action based on that, it extends it over across to marijuana. And then,
Wait, hold on a second. So I thought the safety sensitive jobs causes...
Right.
So
it's
that's
like
where you're headed right
giving
now.
one hand
Right.
with one hand, taking away
All right.
with the
Yeah.
other.
All right. I just
I've
want
seen a
everybody to
couple
catch on
examples
that
of
they
that,
just
right.
gave it to us. Now they're about to take it from us.
Right.
So Section 8K provides a list of safety-sensitive jobs. And so my thought on this is that, sure, you don't want your surgeon to be under the influence, and you don't want a police officer to be under the influence, and so on. All of that is reasonable. The problem, however, is that urinalysis and other forms of drug testing have no correlation whatsoever with impairment. So, for instance, you can test positive for THC with using federally legal hemp. Federally legal hemp products often contain trace amounts of THC, and there have been published articles in toxicology journals showing positive urinalysis from just hemp products. So an employee who, let's say under a doctor's order, is using a CBD product that has trace THC, they could test positive. Now, according to 788, they can't face any adverse employment action. But this takes that away, saying that if you're in a safety-sensitive job and you're a card holder and you test positive, then you can be terminated.
Okay, so Julie, let's look at that from a legal standpoint. What's the problem here?
Well, I mean, there's a number of problems here. You get into, workers' compensation issues, employment law issues. I mean, insurance. I mean, the issues are myriad and a lot for me to list out. But but again, the basics of what Lawrence says is true. We don't want people, who are highly impacted, doing brain surgery. But I'd also say that the list of safety-sensitive positions is a little bit arbitrary as well. Not to mention, the legal implications.
Anyone who uses a power tool, for instance.
Right, which...
Yeah.
Electric can opener.
Yeah, the list is insanely long. Norma, do we have any way to repair that yet? Do any of these bills address that?
No, but there is Senate Bill 1030 that has the same language in it, so we have to be aware to watch for that one. That one's by Senator Paxton. So if that's your senator, please talk to him about this safety-sensitive jobs. I think these senators probably just aren't aware that we've all been going to work with cannabis in our system, and they didn't know it. So, it's time for them to understand that you can enjoy your cannabis in the evening and sleep well after using it, and or get rid of your pain for the next day and still work and be a good employee. Many people are.
So what are these bills, these three new ones we've talked about, don't address this issue yet?
No, they don't. The three that you gave me this morning?
Yeah.
No, but we can get language into them.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Lawrence, what do we got next?
Let me just say a couple more things about the safety-sensitive issue that employers are probably saying, well, they got to do something. They got to do something.
They don't know how to not do it.
Now, if you, for instance, as an employee, go on vacation to Colorado, or you use cannabis, 3 weeks later you get a random test. You may not have used it for 3 weeks. You can still test positive. So once again, there's no correlation between use and impairment. And so the employer's saying, well, we got to do something. Well, there's better options. If you're really concerned, if the employer's really concerned with workplace safety, if that truly is their concern, then what they could do is they can use this technology that one company is called Predictive Safety in Colorado. Basically, it's an app on a tablet, and employees can be tested as soon as they start work for their response time and for various other metrics to determine whether or not they're fit to work that day. And it'll catch people on cold medicine, it'll catch people with
Okay, I don't mean to interrupt you, but... Hello, John?
Hey, how are you?
Hey, John, you are on speaker. You are on with everybody. You're live with all of us. Norma, Lawrence, and Julie, and myself.
Hey, John.
Hey, thanks for having me on. This is a good break. I'm actually up at the Capitol right now planning to what all we're going to do to finish up deadline week next week.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. We do have a couple of things we've already run into. Would one of you like to address that, what we were talking about a minute ago with the which one was it?
Any physician safety sensitive.
Well, that's what we were just talking about.
Action.
But earlier when we were talking about John Calling, we had something right away we needed to talk to him about. The disciplinary action, was that the one we don't have anything addressing that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Section 6, I don't know if you have the bill in front of you, probably not.
I do not, sorry.
E11, okay. Well, this talks about the disciplinary action and the open language. Julie, could you explain that just a little bit?
Yeah, this is the provision that allows the department to revoke or take an action against a license for, I believe the language is, and any other reason as determined by the department. Does that ring a bell with you?
I think I know the section you're talking about.
And we were just having a discussion that the kind of open wording of that would in theory allow the department to revoke or take action for literally anything they determined. Instead, it might be more appropriate to use language that said, or any other violation of these laws or the statutes or the rules. Have you become aware of that one, or what your thoughts are on that?
So I haven't become aware of that one, but I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think the theory behind it is to leave enough flexibility for the department to do their job. But I actually like your language a lot better because it still gives the department flexibility, but it's not quite so open-ended.
Yeah, because it would be impossible for you to list every violation in the statute. But to give them, if anything else violates this statute or their administrative rules, that seems reasonable, and gives them.
I think that's a good
discretion.
idea. I think that's a change that hopefully we can kind of all agree, and we'll talk about it later. I've already been amending some of the medical marijuana bills that are coming after it. That seems like a really good change that shouldn't have a problem getting made.
Okay, let me ask you about the next one here, because I know your time is limited. This would be the physician issue. Now, I thought we had a remedy to that.
We do, yeah. Now, are you talking about so there are two physician issues that I have a remedy for. One is the MDDO issue, which I affectionately call the Dr. White Killer issue, and I mean that in a good way. The issue is that is solved in the Unity Bill, but the Unity Bill doesn't have an emergency. So what I've done is I've taken three medical marijuana bills that are alive in the House, and I've put an amendment, the same amendment on all three, which puts in that physician language, but puts on an emergency. And there's another physician problem, the language that allows any physician to look at, to check on medical marijuana patients.
Right.
In that same amendment to those three bills, I deal with that physician problem and make it clear that only the recommending physician can check on their own patient.
Okay. Good.
So it is only the recommending physician, which if one of those three bills pass with an emergency, which I think they will pass after the medical marijuana bill is signed into law, so they'll be the most recent expression of the legislature, which means it will essentially overrule that portion of the Unity Bill. Okay,
and do we have any sort of working solution for the safety-sensitive jobs issue?
We just have a massive difference of opinion on the safety-sensitive job issue. Where I come down, and you were at that meeting, remember the safety-sensitive jobs issue was actually even broader. I offered three amendments, and I continued to offer them until I started losing votes. So there's a vote on where everybody stands on the safety-sensitive job issue. Where I stand, where everybody knows where I was willing to compromise, and I would be in favor of heavy machinery and federal contractors that have to have a drug-free workforce. I'm trying to be reasonable. As I got in the argument, it was mostly me and Senator Daniels. We were talking about pharmaceuticals, and that was the vote that I ended up losing, that I wanted to take, the pharmaceutical industry out. I stopped because at that point I was going to lose every other vote. I think we need to continue to move forward on the safety-sensitive job issue, but I'm in a minority in the legislature in how I feel about that issue.
Okay, Lawrence, you look like you want to add something to this.
One thought that I had regarding the safety sensitive is, beside the issue of the list of what sorts of employment are considered safety sensitive. The general problem that I have is that this is just bad science. There is no correlation between a positive urinalysis and impairment. There's not even a correlation between positive urinalysis and having used a Schedule 1 drug, because you can still test positive with federally legal hemp. So one thought is that if the language were to provide a little bit more guidance and said something like positive urinalysis is not dispositive towards workplace impairment, then that language could provide some kind of balance with regards to the protections for the employee and the interests of the employer.
Well, I would be very much for that. I think that's a great idea. There is one other point, though, I do want to point out on the safety-sensitive jobs. We're still an at-will state, so there is a lot of this. I mean, Julie can tell you this too. I mean, if an employer wants to terminate you and you're not protected, for some other reason, they can terminate you for any reason but the wrong reason. So if they want to, they could find another reason to do it.
And he's absolutely right. They do that all the time, and so that would not be new.
Yeah, they could find. So well, I think it is really, really important, and I agree with you, Lawrence. I think what you're talking about, or say, Dr. Pasternak, where you're talking about where that would really come up is in like the work comp arena. That's where that's really important. Whether or not we're showing, like you said, a urinalysis coupled with something else that it's not dispositive, you have to couple it with a showing of actual impairment. I mean, without getting too deep, that was why I'm attacking some of the other issues I'm attacking first as opposed to safety-sensitive jobs, only because at the end of the day, let's say the safety-sensitive job language wasn't even in there, which is, I probably prefer it that way. There's still, because we're in at-will state, I don't know how much it changes in people's day-to-day lives. And I've really been focused on stuff that I think changes outcomes in people's day-to-day lives.
Okay, I know you're running out of time. I actually have a clock running because I know how much time I'm limited to here. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here. When we spoke earlier, you mentioned somewhat of a solution to the seed-to-sale problem. Not necessarily getting rid of it, but a problem. Can you tell us your fix on that?
Yeah, so that's also in my amendment. There's some language in the Unity bill that has been brought to my attention that essentially says anyone that does business with OMMA cannot otherwise do business in the medical cannabis industry in Oklahoma. Well, what that essentially does is require OMMA to hire somebody like Metric or some out-of-state vendor to do seed-to-sale. I've talked to no fewer than 5 Oklahomans that believe they have a really good solution for how that could be done, but they're also in the industry, obviously, as you might imagine. So my language gets rid of that requirement, and with the goal being Oklahomans I've had several solutions. The OMMA is going to have to come up with what they think is best, but it has a fix there to allow Oklahomans that opportunity to bid on that product and hopefully get it.
Okay, great. John, I know a lot of us are going to be there tomorrow. We're going to be, our intention is to speak to our senators, point out the things we're having issues with. You want to let us know what you've got going on tomorrow with the Capitol before we let you go?
Well, absolutely. I'll be up here. I've got a rules meeting at 10 o'clock, caucus at noon, and then I go on the floor at 1:30. Come by my office, say hi, talk to Kate. I'll try to pull off the floor. It is our deadline week, and we joke about this all the time, Chris. I wish I could just do full-time 788 stuff, but I still have to be the floor leader. So this is kind of my Super Bowl week. I'm getting all of the bills off the floor, but if people take the time to come to their Capitol and they want to say hi, come say hi, and I'll step off the floor and make sure I at least get to say hi and shake some hands and thank people for coming.
Okay, John. Well, we want to thank you for coming on the show. I definitely want to get you back soon, and I will certainly try and get you on camera tomorrow because I'm sure we're going to have more questions. Thank you.
You got it. Thanks, team. I appreciate it very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay, well, there we go. Our fearless floor leader, as I like to call him. answering a few questions. Anybody want to address some of that? Norma, how about you? You haven't said too much yet.
Yeah, I'm kind of like in awe of both of these people with their legal minds
Yeah,
here.
it's these educated people.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of something he said that, oh, you didn't suggest the software package for him. Does he know about that?
I'm not sure. In theory, I could have brought it up. I actually brought it up with Senator Daniels during the working group meeting some time ago. And so just to go back to that, if the actual concern of the employer is workplace safety, then your analysis basically means almost nothing. In fact, somebody could test negative while being impaired, even on cannabis. So there's just no clear correlation. But there are devices, there's software, there are apps that are commercially available that are managed through a sizable database with a lot of research behind them, providing means through which employers could evaluate the actual ability of an employee at that present time. So the largest company I'm aware of that provides this technology is called Predictive Safety out of Colorado. They have thousands of clients ranging from heavy machinery to truckers and so on. And like I said, it's basically something that could be run on a tablet, and it's a set of activities that last about a minute. And the database basically monitors that day's performance by the employee and correlates it to the historical performance of the employee. And if their performance is below a certain threshold, then an alert is given to their supervisor, and it could be due to fatigue, it could be due to having a cold, it could be due to Benadryl, it could be due to a bad mood, it could be due to alcohol, that they may just not be in a good position to be doing something that's potentially dangerous that day.
So we'll have to address that next year in legislation for the insurance companies and for other groups that have the wording on a positive urinalysis, such and such happens.
Now that software you're talking about, Julie, let me ask you from a legal standpoint, if they were to start using something like that, my concern there with something like that would become suddenly a standard. Everybody would be tested on their way in the door. I mean,
That's a good thing if you have people running machines.
Well, if you have certain safety sensitive jobs, I guess.
Exactly. And we're not talking about McDonald's workers.
The thing is so many people in this state go in with hangovers that would knock over a horse, and no one says a word. And sometimes they're still half inebriated in the morning, and that seems to be okay in this state.
But maybe it shouldn't be.
Yeah, exactly. We need a new standard, and we would have to do that next year in legislation so they can change that wording that says on the result of a positive urinalysis. If we can get rid of that language and start people thinking about using a performance test, because it's the best way to do it. It really is for everything, except McDonald's. You don't really need to perform much at McDonald's, but did they drop that?
I don't know. They could have used some a little while ago.
Okay, great.
I was there, so.
Everybody's safe at McDonald's.
Yeah.
That's actually all restaurants and hotels and casinos and everything.
Right.
Go
Chris,
ahead, Julie.
looking at Lawrence's list, the next one up, Section 9A, that's the provision that allows the OMMA to call the recommending physician and verify the need for the patient license. That was one that I'm really hopeful that Floor Leader Eccles can get addressed in one of his bills. My understanding is how that wording works in actuality and what was intended are two different things. But the way it's written essentially allows the OMMA to call any physician of someone who has a recommendation, say, do they really need this? Do they really need this? When my understanding was it was put there, to be able to question recommendations that might be fraudulent. Well, then put, upon the suspicion of fraud, the OMMA may, or upon the documented suspicion of fraud.
It doesn't say they're going to ask what you need it for either. Just do you really need?
Do you need it?
That's
do you
a
really
weird
need
question.
Yeah.
Does he really need it?
Do you really have chronic pain? Do you really have anxiety? No, there needs to be documented suspicion of fraud.
Right.
The documentation already happens at the at the patient drives. The doctor actually writes a code on their recommendation.
Right.
But part of what,
so that's the reason.
Right.
And there's no other under 788.
I agree.
But something that's happened is that certain individuals have forged physician signatures and submitted the recommendation forms.
Oh
And,
my.
and the point is, 9A is supposed to be addressing that kind of scenario. So basically, what 7A should say is to verify the validity of the recommendation, to verify the information or
That's
the
a good
signature.
wording, yes.
That's the wording that should be there. That, talking to Floor Leader Eccles, that was the intent.
Right.
But verify need implies that
Right.
some government bureaucrat could challenge a doctor as to whether or not the patient really should be using marijuana.
Okay, Julie, one I want to ask you specifically about, because it needs a legal answer here. This Section 10D, physician not located at the same physical address. Can you delve into that, please?
Yeah.
I'm hearing that means no more patient drives at dispensaries.
It does. You know, if the wording says the physician may be not located at the same, is it location or physical address as the dispensary? I'm trying to
It's
remember.
physical address
address.
dispensary.
So that essentially says that it really does, you know, in practicality mean that a physician cannot be on location doing recommendations. If it said, you know, a physician, you know, cannot, it could say a physician cannot practice medicine, but it doesn't. It makes it even more vague. Well, you know, we were having a conversation before this started that, you know, potentially that could bar physicians from entering dispensaries altogether because of the vague language. My belief on why this was introduced is that they did not want, you know, physicians, you know, being at a dispensary, especially one that they had a financial interest in or owned, making recommendation and steering patients towards expensive products they didn't need.
Okay, let me throw a scenario. I don't mean to interrupt you, but let me throw a scenario I know of which goes on now. There is dispensaries that, and it's because of the way they have to legally set up the business, they're splitting the address. So a building is now 2 or 3 addresses, or if it's, you know, if there's any way to divide it at all, it's got a new address now. So the offices across the hall could be a different address.
Yeah.
And I know in cases where doctors are being, are planning on being in those offices. Is that going to be a problem?
No, that would be a workaround for this. You know, this says at the same physical address. So if we wanted to, you know, take the building we're in and break it up into 4 different suites, you know,
Then
those
they'll
are
be
4
safe.
different physical addresses, suite A, B, C, D. So
Okay, so those dispensaries that have like already split their dispensary where it's a CBD shop at one address and a dispensary at another, they can just do it at the CBD shop.
yes, absolutely. Under the wording that this is written, yes.
Okay. All right. Where are we at next,
I'm
Lawrence?
going to just jump back to 10C. So 10A, just quickly, the intent there is to allow any MD or DO to recommend. They don't have to have national board certification. 10C is a really very, very positive one. Because a lot of physicians are worried about the legal consequences, either for recommending marijuana or even for treating patients that are card holders. And so one of the reasons why so many chronic pain patients have been terminated is because it's not because the doctors don't think marijuana is effective. It's not because they don't think that it's medically safe to use in combination with opioids. Well, I'm sure some do have these worries, but the main reason why they're being terminated is the physicians are afraid for their own businesses. And so what Section 10C does is, at least at the state level, it explicitly says that physicians will not be subject to any kind of infractions, penalties, reprimands, and so on for either recommending or for treating patients who are card holders, including prescribing to them scheduled drugs. So that language is in there. I push that language specifically to be in there, the reference to prescribing scheduled drugs. So that therefore means that a pain management doctor, an oncologist, and so on here can prescribe scheduled drugs to the marijuana card holders without, at least at the state level, any concerns, any legal concerns.
Well, that's certainly good news. I just, I want to see it roll out in practice.
Yep.
As we talked about a long time ago when this started, my concern was patient protections, and you and Eccles were concerned about doctor protections, and so that would give patients protections. And while I understand that, I still see, like I was saying earlier, too many, what do you call it, abandonment, too many cases
Medical
of abandonment.
abandonment.
So that's why I suggested something for patients rather than just let's just keep protecting the doctors, because they'll do the right thing if we just give them enough protection. We've been giving them protection. You've met with the head of every organization. They're still doing it. So,
well, you can just come up with a list of fears that physicians have, some of them less rational than others, in my opinion. And so the more that we could allay their concerns, the better it is for patients. And this is at least a good step.
It is.
okay.
Yeah.
So
All
what do
right.
we got next?
So now we're on to 12A. And 12A, I actually first wasn't happy with it, and I rethought it, and I think it's probably much more of a positive than I first realized. And basically what 12A does is it speaks to where patients could home grow. And initially I was concerned that it doesn't say that patients can home grow on the property of their caregiver. So I was thinking, well, at first maybe there's a problem, because what if you're a patient with a caregiver and you want the caregiver to grow for you? The language initially I thought doesn't seem to make that possible, but in fact, what it's much broader. It effectively says that a patient licensee could either grow at their home, or they could grow at any other location where they have the written authorization of the owner of that
Okay,
property.
but that doesn't eliminate the need for a caregiver, because that, Julie, does it? Does that?
No, that's
doesn't-
not the point.
No.
That doesn't give the person who owns that property the legal right to take care of those plants. So,
Well, what it does do is it says, so let's say I'm a patient and you're my caregiver, and let's say I can't grow at my home. Then if I can get your written permission, then you can grow for me. Or
no, you can grow at my house. I can't take care of them without the caregiver part.
Right, you have to be a caregiver.
Right.
Right.
But this person can like lease part of your room where you're going to grow his cannabis.
Okay.
Right.
So this
And-
is the loophole. You think this loophole takes care of the whole caregiver issue?
I think it takes care of the concern that I previously had that all home grow has to be at the patient's own property. And I think the language here indicates that that patient could have it grown on anyone else's property with the permission of that property owner.
Yeah. See, I see that as meaning that, as I said earlier, I can call my uncle or whoever and go plant it out behind his farm or behind his barn, as long as I have his permission. That'll help a lot of people with apartments.
So what's that going to do to the bill you were working on?
I don't see. That's the thing. The bill you're talking about is the caregiver part. Lawrence and I both worked on that. I don't see how. You tell me. I think if you try and use that loophole in a caregiver situation, you're not only violating the spirit of the law, I think you're breaking it. What do you think, Julie?
Well, I mean, it does say that medical marijuana grown by a medical marijuana patient, license holder, or caregiver can be grown on property for which the patient license holder has the property owner's written permission. I would say that it's a gray area for sure. You could certainly make the argument that Lawrence is making. I would be more comfortable if it says, can be grown on property for which the patient or caregiver has the permission, then that would be very clear. But I think there's an argument certainly to do what he's doing.
Okay, so we certainly still need to push that caregiver bill through, but
Make sure we tweak the language on
Yeah.
that, though, so that it doesn't become more restrictive than at least my interpretation of this.
Well,
and
then-
don't forget, we have this week. That's it.
Then we
Yeah.
better
Monday,
get-
Tuesday, Wednesday,
looks
'cause
like
they go
we're not
home early
sleeping
on
We're not
Thursday.
sleeping tonight, so.
And let me just read this language so we're all clear about it. All medical marijuana grown by a medical marijuana patient license holder or caregiver may only be grown on real property owned by the patient license holder or on real property for which the patient license holder has the property owner's written permission to grow marijuana on the property. So I could go to my next door neighbor, I could say, can you grow for me? And they'd say, sure, let me just get written permission, and it could grow. I could go to my cousin. I could go to my caregiver. This language here basically says so long as the property owner provides written permission, then a patient could have it grown on that person's property.
I think that the implication in that last portion of the sentence, though, is that the patient is doing the growing.
Right,
Although
that's
in the
what I was
beginning,
saying.
it says patient or caregiver. later on it only talks about the patient getting the permission to grow there. So I think there's an inference there that the patient's the only one doing the growing. But I think you can certainly make the argument you're making. If the word caregiver was in that second portion, I think it'd be crystal clear.
Yeah, so I think we definitely still need to keep pushing that caregiver language through. We'll just have to tweak it, like you said. Maybe we can get to that.
And the next section provides a rule that says that access, right, can't be to the general public. All medical marijuana plants grown by a patient or caregiver shall be grown so that the marijuana is not accessible to a member of the general public.
Okay, so you need to lock your gate. You need to fence it in, and you need to lock your gate.
Right.
I got
That's
that
how
question today.
We met talking about that, arguing
We
about
did.
fencing. I like to point that out because I told her, and I like to say this, I told her she was going to make me put a fence up long enough to cover the curvature of the earth to cut in, or it was going to cut into my daylight.
Right.
So
I got the same
love
question
that
today, and somebody
argument. That's
said,
stretching it, isn't it?
for a patient at home growing their own plants, do I have to have an 8-foot fence? And I said, no, but if you let anybody see it, it's going to be gone as soon as you go
Yeah.
to work. So make sure no one can see it.
So what does a patient have to have for their fence? Julie, can you remember?
Right now, I thought that, I know it had to be blocked from street view. I thought that we had the 6-foot fence in there if it was outside. Otherwise, it had to be secured. I thought that was still in the rule. Let me pull it up real quick.
6-foot fence isn't bad. That's not too bad. And again, as long as it doesn't have to be the privacy fence.
Right.
But again, you're not going to want everybody to see it. So, you know, but people like myself, this is where this is an issue. People like I live in the middle of nowhere. So, you know, and that was my argument a year ago was, why do I have to fence in my property? You can only, or my plants, you can only see it from a helicopter.
Right.
But, you know, that one didn't seem
Or
to
a
work.
drone.
Or a drone, yes, a drone. Lawrence, while she's looking that up, what do you got next?
Seed to sale.
So-
Okay, and John seems to have addressed that at least. We're going to have seed to sale, but we're hoping the OMMA allows these Oklahoma developed programs. Is that right?
Correct.
Is that how you guys see that? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not particularly happy with seed to sale. I see some positive benefits for it, but one of my thoughts is that if the issue is to prevent diversion, well, in all likelihood, federal law is going to be changing in a matter of months. Many states that haven't yet legalized at least medical marijuana are likely to do so this year or maybe next year. So why should the businesses of Oklahoma bear the cost for something that in all likelihood is going to be going away real soon?
Now, when you say seed to sale, exactly what is, I mean, does it describe it in the language what seed to sale means? Those tracking numbers and the cost of all that?
Well, there is some language describing it. I don't remember the specifics, but
I know what we assume because we've seen it in Colorado.
Don't you have to buy a sticker for every plant?
And in Colorado, they have this little gun that goes around and reads the
Right.
barcode on every plant so that they can make their report.
Yeah.
I guess that's pretty expensive.
Yeah, that's what we're going to end up with.
Yep.
But hopefully some of these people in Oklahoma have developed a less expensive plan.
Yes.
every apple on a tree, every stalk of corn. Imagine if you had to do seed to sale for any other agricultural
Oh my
product.
God.
That'd be ridiculous.
Yeah. So, you know,
Why is it not ridiculous now?
it made sense if you only had 2 or 3 states in the nation and there was worry about diversion to all the other states. But we're at this point with 33 states and, you know, Kansas and Texas and other states that haven't yet legalized in this region are likely to do so soon, it just seems excessive.
Well, now they're telling me it's the diversion is more from what's coming in than what's going out. They think that that's going to stop out-of-state stuff from
Any of the
coming
data
here.
could still be faked, right? You could
Yeah.
just, you know,
Isn't it just one more layer of paperwork?
you know, costly paperwork, right?
Okay.
Right.
A costly system. That,
And we have a lot of small farmers,
Yeah.
and so every dollar they can save, the better. And before we're over with this show, I want to bring up 882, Senate Bill 882. So that's going to be an expense we don't even know.
One thing
Good.
is that we could agree with the ends, but the problem is the means just aren't the right ones, right?
Right.
That, you know,
Right.
if you don't want anything coming from out of state, well, we could agree with that. But is this the best way to do it? And is it going to be even effective? So it's
Julie,
gonna-
did you find the fence?
I didn't see any provisions in the current rules relating to home grow whatsoever.
Was it in the OBN rules, maybe?
the
No.
OBN did have fencing
I think for
provisions,
commercial
but
they
it was
did.
It's for
commercial.
commercial,
Okay.
and there's nothing in 788 that.
So I think that 7-foot or 6-foot fence may have been in the prior rules.
And they got
before
taken out.
Yes, before
And it's out
Mike
right now.
Hunter said no more.
Yep.
So it looks
So
like right
if you're
now-
smart, hide your pot somewhere.
Yeah.
So, next one, the last four that we have listed here are all, I think, positives. 14E11 basically says that business owners or applicants for business licenses either have had 2 years of residency prior to submitting the application, or must have been residents in Oklahoma for 5 years out of the previous 20 or 25 years. And so the idea there is that initially it was just going to be you have to have maintained residency for the past 2 years, but then they added in the additional clause to basically allow for, so to speak, the reverse grapes of wrath for returning
Yeah,
okies.
to get
That
people
is
to come-
happening for
to
sure.
Get people to
Yeah.
come home.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
So
And then lab licenses are what we have until 2020 to get completely compliant with all that.
right. So 17A basically establishes laboratory licenses just to address the question in terms of the transfer of cannabis from, say, a grow to a laboratory to make sure that they're protected legally. 17Q sets out more or less sort of the rough baselines for testing and authorizes the OMMA to establish further particulars. So it provides a list of, in general, what should be tested, which includes cannabinoids and terpenes, the latter being something that I've pressed for. And it doesn't list the specifics, it authorizes instead the OMMA to determine those specifics. And then finally, an interesting one is introduces a new type of license, an educational license. So let's say, for instance, you wanted to start a business teaching people how to home grow. That would be the kind of license for you. Or one way or another, where you would be handling cannabis for the purposes of education.
So they don't give any specifics on what that education will be.
It does require it to be a 501c3 not-for-profit corporation, but I think there's a lot of latitude in there on what type of cannabis education it would be.
Okay. That sounds like the activist clause. That's a 501c3.
So 5 out of these 20 are the only problems. We're getting it fixed.
6.
6?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it depends on your view on seed to sale. That's
I see. True.
yeah. So is this bill all positive? Is this bill all negative? Neither. It's somewhere in between. There's a lot of things that are positives that we shouldn't ignore. Everybody
Right.
wants the gun rights. Everybody wants patient protections. There's real meaning to those physician protections and so on. So there's a lot of good stuff in this. Of course, there's bad stuff. And so rather than saying trash the bill, we need amendments or we need fixes, but 2612 has good stuff in it.
Okay, Norma, you know more about getting amendments done than anybody. What's the procedure here? What's the attack you think for tomorrow? How do we get that done?
As you get there tomorrow, you'll find me on the 4th floor on the east side of the building. That's the Senate side. And I'll be in the foyer. You'll see a bunch of little couches there, and there's a big desk. I'll show you how to pull out your senator, and then we will discuss some of these things that you can offer for language for an amendment. And then if you can talk this person into amending it, they will offer that on the floor, and it'll get voted on the floor, whether people agree with it or not. And then if it passes, it'll go into the bill. If that bill gets changed tomorrow, if 2612 gets changed on the Senate side, then it will have to go back to the House for it to be voted on again over there if they agree with the amendments that were put on it. So we still have a chance of changing things. I want to see as many people up there as we can get up there tomorrow, because that's the only way it's going to change, when they understand who we are. They see us on Facebook, and really they don't have a good opinion of who we are on Facebook, because those that are just normal human beings don't speak out. They only see the bad actors and the ones that are, having a party. They think that this is all just a party. It's not really a medical program. And that's because those are the ones that speak out the most on Facebook, and we don't call their act, although that's been happening. I've seen more people. I just posted one today, this morning, that they were saying, please don't go on Facebook looking like you do, cussing and smoking pot while you're driving down the street. I mean, that's not all of us. We know that. So I want them to see you, the regular human being that lives next door to them, and hear your concerns.
Well, rather than telling them not to be themselves, I would just say that we need to outnumber with good examples. I'm not going to tell anybody how to do this. We all seem to do this a little bit differently. But we do need, like you said, we need more people, more what they would consider people like them.
Right.
To show up and do something about that. Now, you mentioned a bill you want to talk about here. Let's bring that up.
Senate Bill 882 by Senator Weaver of the Senate and Fatgatter of the House. And so I've been talking to Representative Fatgatter. I believe you have too about this, right?
This is the disposal
bill. This is the disposal bill.
This has to do with the cannabis because it's the disposal bill.
And as of this latest bill, this is the engrossed version. If you're looking for it online, go under versions. You put your Senate bill and the number into that little slot on the opening page, and then it takes you to that bill. It'll have the title at the top, and then you look for versions, and then under versions you look for the engrossed one. That's the most recent. And then basically it's setting up to allow licensing for disposal company to be in Oklahoma to dispose of our cannabis. But I can't seem to find too much disposal needs. So
is it limiting the license number right now?
Yep, limits it to 10 companies.
I wonder if I could guess who those 10 would be.
I don't know if you could guess.
Well, I don't know.
It does seem to me like...
But I believe the argument is how much waste will there be? Now, I know that they already removed the patients, so that's a good thing.
Right.
But how much is the dispensary going to throw away?
Yeah, and here's the thing. I know Scott Fettgetter said he's working on... He said it was okay to say this. He's working on removing seed stems and fan leaves from the list.
So those can be composted home or at your business.
So I'm not sure what's left except
the stalks, I guess.
Well, no, that's on
the dirt and the
stems.
water. There is some
the water
worry.
is the only thing.
There is some worry about contaminated water.
I've heard that. I'm concerned about that. But this company's not going to show up to haul off water. They're showing up to take your smoke.
Well,
I'm sorry.
And so this whole thing was about diversion. They were worried about diversion. That's how they sold this to the legislature. Now that gives the disposal company their hands are all, they've got all the cannabis to dispose of.
The biggest problem I have with this bill has to do with something I heard in the Capitol, and it was just the language that was used. And I won't say who it was from, but they said they just feel they deserve a carve-out in this industry.
Well, okay, so what they were saying was they want a license. There was no license for them in that category. So they wanted to have that carved out of the law. And you took it a different way, I get it.
Well, no, when you take that and then you put forward a bill that makes it where you are required to sign up.
Right, required.
Then my conclusion is more accurate than not.
And limited to 10. You're required to sign
and
up.
Limited
Limited
to 10.
Whenever our state makes us do something, then they have to make it also available for us to do it, those who can't afford it, or some other way to do it. They can't dictate that every one of us have a disposal method.
So they got rid of it. We got to take it out for the home grow, but we still have it for the businesses.
Right.
So a dispensary, for instance, a dispensary right now might be willing to take products back. And if they were to, given this bill, if the dispensary has to pay a fee, pay either an annual fee for the service or pay a fee every time they come out, then dispensaries might actually be less willing to take anything back because it'll cost them money. It's not just the loss of
And how much are you going to have? Like 2 grams that somebody complained about, and you're paying a fee every month for it? Yep. Wrong. Now, the processors probably will have some disposal needs.
Well, again, if Scott gets his way, I mean, I'm thinking flour won't be on that list, wouldn't be, unless it was something that didn't pass inspection. Which
Right.
I guess
Well,
if you bring
processors
it back, then that would be something.
processors are going to have this goopy stuff that's left over after they extract, so that needs to be gotten rid of.
You mean the terpenes?
No, I'm talking about the flour that's separated from the
Oh,
oils.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, of course, growers will have a few plants that turn male. So depending on how large your grow is, there might be a few that need to be thrown in the disposal thing.
But now they're going to have to write down and account for and pay each one of those to be held
Right,
off.
right, right.
And with seed to sale, they're going to have to account for and pay for every one of those to be hauled off.
And the worry is diversion. So
Right.
these 10 businesses that will be able to then amass all the waste in the state have all the greater opportunity to make money through diversion.
Yeah.
You know, if you are
Right.
just an individual grower or a dispensary, the amount of waste that you have is maybe, I don't know how much, but it
Yeah.
may not be enough to make it worth your while to engage in criminal practices. But you aggregate all that waste together into one person's hands, there you got some money.
Now you've got a workable product.
So let me
we can
ask
make
you-
something out of that.
Let me ask you this. You remember the HBO show The Sopranos?
Yeah.
Do you remember what Tony Soprano did for a living?
Yeah.
What he told people, the civilians, what he told the people he did for a living?
What was that?
Waste
Yeah.
management.
Okay. Yeah. Waste management, which is exactly what I thought of when I heard of this bill.
Really?
And then when I heard the carve out, again, Norma, I think my reaction is more accurate than not. You know, when,
Okay.
when you throw in the 10 license limits,
Yeah. We'll see how that goes.
I just
We've
don't
got
see
about
this
3
ending
minutes
well.
till 7:30, and I think that's an hour we've been
Yeah.
online.
It's been an hour and 15 minutes. I was
So,
about to end it. So you
Julie
guys,
probably has something that
Julie,
she needs
you
to
want
say.
to
at the end.
be the first
No?
to wrap us up here? You want to
Yeah.
say
No,
something
just-
before we
I'm-
go away?
Looking forward to seeing everyone at the Capitol tomorrow.
And so you'll be there?
I will
be
be
there?
there.
Okay.
Very
Standing
good.
above the crowd.
Great.
Look for me.
I will be there
Okay.
too. Look for me, and I'll help you find your senator.
I hope to be there.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're, as Norma said, her and I will both be there. We'll walk you guys through on how to call out your senator. If you want to see how to do that right now, you can go watch us last week. We did this exact same thing. Did a live video. We filled out the paper, showed you the slip, turned in the sheet with the 5 things we found wrong. I'll see if I can get a little list of what's left wrong on here that we still have major issues with for tomorrow. But I think if you've taken notes, and we'll probably post some later, you've got some idea as to how we feel about this bill. Again, we're not demanding that anybody burn the house down. We want an amendment thrown in this, a word change, something to cause another look at this to hopefully address some of these. And while I understand trailer bills can fix all this, I still can't get anybody to explain to me why we have to pass bad bills and then chase them with trailer bills rather than pass good bills to begin with. So I'm not going to be on board with this bill.
He needs to run for office next time
But-
so he can figure all this out.
But if this bill passes, we will find a way to work with it, and we will chase it
Certainly.
with all these trailer bills.
Right.
And we will be here every year, so we're not going anywhere. Okay, Lawrence, Norma, and Julie, thank you very much for coming on. I love the roundtable. You know, Sunday mornings I watch my political shows in Washington. We should maybe try and do this on a regular basis on Sunday nights. All right, folks, that's it from the Capitol, or at least a couple miles from the Capitol. Till tomorrow morning, stay grumpy. We'll see you on the road.